Of course, Ravens wrap up the regular season this Saturday, 4:30 here in Baltimore when they host the Cleveland Browns. The game will be on ABC and ESPN, and that will involve our next guest, of course, analyst for ESPN, former NFL quarterback. He's on the call. He is Mr. Dan Orlovsky, and he's back with us now here on GCR. Dan, it's Glenn in Baltimore. It's been a long time. Appreciate you taking the time for us. Hope you and your family are having a happy new year.
Yeah, same to you. You as well, absolutely.
Hey, man. So I guess we could pussyfoot around it, or we just dive into it, right? Like, are you feeling right now like whenever you do a TV show, you're almost like dodging bullets at the moment? Are you at the point where you're just like, God, I'm ready for this to be over with?
I think there has been moments over the last like 10 days of that, but I think I'm very like aware I choose to do this job, and choose to say the things that I say. So it comes with it. Two, I've just pivoted to the mindset of like, all these guys are just absolutely remarkable. Everybody's losing their mind today because Baker Mayfield isn't in the NFC playoffs, or excuse me, the NFC Pro Bowl. And it's like, well, who are you going to take out? Because so many of them are playing so well. So I'm very content and comfortable with it. Just celebrating all the greatness of many of these guys.
You'll be stunned to learn that I think that Lamar Jackson should be the NFL MVP. But let me finish the sentence for a second. I also have said out loud a couple times, I think that Josh Allen's going to win, and I don't think it's some sort of travesty if that's the case, and I'll be fine with it. I don't love the idea that he might win because simply he's never won one before. Like, that doesn't seem like it. But I get it. Like, he's been really good. They beat the top team in the AFC and the NFC. I understand that there is a strong argument for Josh Allen, even though I just think Lamar Jackson might be the best player in football at the moment.
And there's probably not a big argument not logically to stand on against it. I think that's kind of the resignation is we're just being very honest about it all. There's 10, 12 guys that are, having quote unquote MVP caliber seasons. And then there's, the guys that you realistically sit there and go, okay, well, who actually can win it, giving, kind of, I guess, the narrative around, well, you're not going to win it if your team's not in the playoffs more than likely. So does that knock off a Joe Burrow, and who's absolutely unquestionably having an MVP caliber season? Sure. Well, Saquon Barkley, MVP caliber season, absolutely. But you're not going to give it to him because he doesn't play quarterback, and he's not going to break Eric Dickerson's records for some people. They think along those lines. So then it comes down to Josh and Lamar in many ways, like the guys that we feel, yes. And that's why I've said, like, two of these guys are going to win Offensive Player of the Year and MVP, and two of them are going to be disappointed and frustrated. So Lamar's having a remarkable season. Josh Allen is having a remarkable season. I could sit here and talk to you about numbers. Anybody can take the numbers and spin it to the guy that they want to win more in favor of whatnot. I have just sat there and said, given everything that's around each quarterback and the way it looks, I think it's hard not to give it to Josh, just because as remarkable as Lamar's season has been, I think Josh is probably doing as much with less, more than less. You just have to watch it and look at it.
So only for the sake of it, and then I promise we can talk about other things.
Sure.
I swear.
Yeah. It's a great conversation.
I didn't. But I also know that you have to do it every day, so I'm not really. And also, I'm almost at the point where I'm MVP now. To be truth be told, Dan.
Yeah.
Is there anything to be said for? I think the stronger argument that people would make in Baltimore for Lamar Jackson is there isn't a really bad game in there. There isn't a week where you were
the Pittsburgh loss, maybe he was okay.
Yeah, that was the worst that he was all season, and he wasn't at all the reason why they lost that game, right? Like, whereas on the flip side, there were a couple of games where you look at there was a 9 for 30 in there for Josh Allen. Why does that part not matter? And again, I know that you would say maybe it's just other things that matter more, but why isn't that argument one that resonates more?
Yeah, because I would say they're playing 17 games. I mean, the chance for them to have a game that, is average to below average is probably going to happen. I would tell you that I thought Lamar was average to below average against Pittsburgh in the loss. I thought Josh was really bad against. I thought he was worse against Baltimore than he was against Houston, candidly. So, yeah, you're not going to get a huge argument to like which one. I think that the statistical argument is a little bit flawed because you can sit there and say, well, then why do people vote? If we're just going to say who's got the best stats, don't have anybody vote. Just computers do it. And so Lamar statistically is absolutely remarkable. Is he having the best year of his career? You can make the argument that's the case. I'll candidly tell you guys that I've had conversations with people that are associated with the team, and they rave about Derrick Henry and the impact of Derrick Henry and how much that has just made everything for everybody so much better. And so there's that element attached to it as well. I remember to start the season, maybe 6 or 7 weeks in, going, man, I think the guys, it's Sam Darnold and Justin Jefferson and Lamar Jackson and Derrick Henry. And everyone's like, well, they're all going to cancel each other out in a way. I'm sure part of that has happened as well. So the worst part of all this is that if you say you think Josh Allen's the MVP, people perceive it as, well, Lamar Jackson's not good. Or if you say Lamar Jackson's the MVP, Josh Allen's not. They're both having remarkably incredible seasons.
Well, and they're both in the same spot in that, I guess maybe it matters more to Josh Allen because he's never been MVP. But I think the part of the reason why I'm not the guy that's going to scream about it is because I do think that Lamar Jackson's past this mattering. I genuinely believe that.
You think the fact that he's won it twice is mattering?
I think it's to the point of I have to win a Super Bowl and nothing's going to change if I win a third MVP.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
For sure.
But Dan Orlovsky's with us here in GCR. And I think that almost is the opinion that I almost have as a Ravens fan, whatever level you want to say I'm a fan, is I can't care anymore. He's won 2 of these and he doesn't have a Super Bowl to show for it. You couldn't get me to care if he wins the third one now. Now it's all about this other thing. This has to be the thing that matters. And it is really interesting to see if they're in the best position that they've been to try to go do that because, as you point out, this is where having Derrick Henry really does matter. If you can get the best version of Lamar Jackson with a Derrick Henry clicking, which you've got for the last couple of weeks, that could be the difference for the Baltimore Ravens and how they can finally get over the hump in the AFC playoffs.
Oh, there's no doubt. I would tell you, I candidly, because we're just on that MVP talk, and I think it's the case for both of them, Josh and Lamar. No one's going to care about talking about them differently until they go win the Super Bowl. I asked Lamar that today. Talk to me about how much the MVP matters to you. And he's like, Dan, I remember Lamar saying that this last year. He's like, Dan, I just want to win a Super Bowl. He's like, I haven't won a championship since I was a kid. I never dreamed about winning the Heisman as a kid. I never dreamed about winning the MVP as a kid. I only dreamed about the confetti falling. And I think that's a very genuine mindset for him. I think Baltimore offensively, when they show up and play their game, they're the most impossible offense in the AFC to stop when they show up and play their game. And there's been moments when they haven't this year. I think they're very aware of that when they play their very best, there's no one that can really handle them. And I think that's the question going into the playoffs is which version do you get? If you get their A-plus game, there's no doubt they can come out of the AFC.
So obviously, Dan, going to Buffalo, going to Kansas City, those are really difficult things, but that's external. If you just look internally at the Baltimore Ravens, what still concerns you about their ability to make a Super Bowl run?
Yeah, when they get into that, win or go home game. And they don't control it maybe to the way that they expect to or want to. How do they course correct? I mean, that's really kind of been the monkey off their back, both in the playoffs over the past couple of years and this year is when they get off schedule a little bit offensively or they're trying to get themselves back on in ahead of the sticks. How do they do it? How do they handle it? And I think that's something that they are more equipped to doing it this year, but that's been a little bit of their issue, a little bit of their MO. And so when that situation presents itself, because you would imagine it's going to, if you're going to have to beat a Pittsburgh and a Buffalo and a Kansas City to get there type of thing, you would imagine it's going to. So just when that presents itself, how do they go about handling it and who do they turn to to get themselves through it.
Yeah, it's strange, right? Because like, I think we all know that they're plenty capable of it at this point, right? Like we
No
know
doubt.
they can do it. I guess the follow up would be, and clearly it doesn't matter this week necessarily, but how much does their history in the playoffs matter? Like, is that something that becomes a weight within these games, and the way that they kind of came apart in the AFC Championship game a year ago? How much do you feel like they're carrying that as they get into the playoffs in the coming weeks?
Yeah, does it weigh you down? I think yes. I think that there's also a very real vantage point of they're so much more equipped to handle it. Asking them point blank, you never want to live in the past, but you obviously want to learn from the reasons why it didn't go that way. And they are very much so outspoken about that growth mindset and constantly learning from it. And that's part of the reason why they attacked the offseason with a Derrick Henry addition and how they built their system and the diversity within the system. And so I do think that there's a greater level of confidence that, when those ruts or, that obstacle presents itself, that they're more equipped to handle it. And they've got better people to handle it and different versions of attacking whatever the questions that defense present themselves.
No, I think that, look, I think it's clear that's the reason they built it, but they still have to go do it. Obviously,
No doubt. Yeah. And
like,
that's a real thing. They got to do it. And it's win or go home. Like that's the reality. And everyone asks, who can beat the Kansas City Chiefs? And it's anybody can beat them, but can you beat them in the fourth quarter when there's 8 minutes to go and you're down 2? And if you don't win, next week doesn't exist.
Yeah, and they're not going to help. They're not going to conspire in those moments. And that, is the
Right.
best thing that you can say about as good as the Kansas City Chiefs are, the biggest thing they do is they're not going to help you in those moments. They're not
Correct.
going to give you
Correct.
any inch to get you closer to the finish line. You're going to have to beat them. And we can say they've looked like they have looked vulnerable, but I've talked about it a little bit the last couple of weeks. I look at the group of pass catchers they have, and maybe none of them are clicking the way that Rashee Rice was a year ago, but on the whole, that top group of 5, like, they don't have to rely on Kadarius Toney this year and whether or not he's going to catch the football. That group of Worthy and Hopkins and Hollywood Brown getting into the mix and looking good, and the way that Gray's come on, like, I actually think in a way they might be more daunting at this point than they were a year ago when they went on to win the Super Bowl.
Not even close. Not even close. They were way more vulnerable last year. Last year, they were this team that had horrific drop issues and awful offensive penalties. And, they credit to them. They figured it out when it mattered the most, but they are way more consistent this year. And, the last 2 or 3 weeks, the movement that they've had at the offensive line positions, that's really the big difference, is that they now have a starting 5 that seems more than capable. And I don't think they're nearly as vulnerable this year as they were last year.
All right. Before we let you go, Dan, if I could, just what does it take for the Baltimore Ravens? And I don't want to be dismissive of this week. I feel like I'm being way too dismissive of this game. We haven't even talked about this game. I'm sure you understand the way that we're feeling here. But
Sure.
but what, like, if we finish the sentence with the Baltimore Ravens will finally break through and get back to the Super Bowl, how would you finish that sentence?
I would tell you that they'll finally get back there if, when push comes to shove, they don't forget who they are identity-wise on offense, and when Lamar doesn't overthink the situation. I think that at times they do, and at times he does. And he forgets that he's the best player on the field more often than not. And I think if they can get past that hurdle, that blip, and obviously with the change of bringing Kyle on the back end, and this team is plenty good enough to go get back to the Super Bowl and come out of the AFC.
All right, and you're excited about seeing Bailey Zappi, I assume, on Saturday.
I have a great appreciation for the rivalries. We'll see, who plays and who doesn't for Cleveland. I'd love to see Miles go. We'll see if he does. But I know this. I no matter what Ravens fans think, for some reason, I love watching Lamar play. I always have since, he was in school, and that's why when he came out of the draft, I championed him. But I'm also very excited to see kind of Derrick in person. I haven't seen Derrick in person in a game in a long time. So I'm excited to watch both those guys kind of be on the field together.
At Dan Orlovsky 7 on Twitter is how you can follow him. And, of course, the game is Saturday. It's tomorrow, 4:30 on ABC and ESPN. Dan, we do appreciate you. I'm sure there'll be Ravens fans that are mad at me, and then they can be mad. It's just the way it goes. I thank you for taking the time. I know it's an insanely busy week for you. Appreciate you doing this, and look forward to seeing you in town tomorrow.
You got it, man.